Tim, thanks so much for having a short conversation here today about your new book, No Ordinary Marriage, Together for God's Glory. I know you've been in pastoral ministry 25 years now. I know you've counseled a lot of people preparing for marriage, counseled marriages in trouble, marriages needing to grow. What are some of the most important things that you want young people preparing for marriage or in marriage to know, to come out of learning from your ministry and counseling?
Well, thanks, Justin. I think one of the most important things is to assure the couple that what their marriage is more than what the two of them are bringing to the marriage. You know, mutual attraction, certain commonality of goals. There needs to be something outside the marriage that serves to galvanize the two of them together, gives them that bright star that they're shooting for. And I think only one thing qualifies, and that's the glory of God. We want to see young couples come together to glorify God. And we talk about what that means in this book, talk about that in premarital sessions, and really is the anchor for good Christ-centered marriages.
You use this analogy in the book of a rope and being tethered to the rope. Maybe you could explain that, because I think that's a helpful imagery of aiming for God's glory.
You know, I think God pitches marriage at a very high level. It'd be difficult to put into words how high the Lord would want us to climb in our marriages. And I use this idea of the analogy of a mountain. You know, we want to reach that marital peak. Everybody comes into marriage with romantic notions of what their marriage might become, and they're often very disappointed that they don't find that they didn't get that romantic, long-lasting joy. And so we want to talk about where a marriage that is focusing on God's glory can go. And the glory of God really is that rope to which two people are tethered. It's the tie that binds, as it were. And it's that rope that they're clinging to, and the one that God uses to bring them to higher and more fulfilling, more exalting levels.
And you've been married how many years?
23.
23 years.
Yeah.
What has cruciform love? That's another big theme I know in your ministry, in the book, and your vision of marriage. What does cruciform love look like in your life and in your pastoral counseling?
Yeah. Well, cruciform, obviously you're referring to the cross of Christ, which is the one place in world history where we see God-like love, supernatural love, come to its fullest expression on the cross. And the miracle of marriage is that the Lord wants that love to indwell the lives of both husband and wife, and for that love to be passed back and forth between husband and wife, a cruciform love. And what is it? It's this, the amazing capacity of Jesus Christ to empty himself for the good of those he was wanting to save. And when that same self-emptying love occupies the heart of a husband and a wife, and they're passing that love back and forth between the two of them, when Jesus Christ is living in their heart, reproducing his love within them, this marriage can become something that is, well, it's a little bit of heaven on earth.
One of the things I think is, as people pick up your book and look at it, there's going to be some elements that they've seen in other books, discussion of sexuality, discussion of conflict, good communication, but I can't think of another recent marriage book that talks about the role of the church. And you have an entire chapter on the importance of the church in the life of marriage. Why did you include a chapter on that?
It's really interesting when you look at what Paul does in Ephesians and Colossians. He brings up three sets of couplets, husband and wife, parents, children, employer, employee. It kind of looks as though he's saying these are the three fundamental social units of society. But if you look at where he's doing it, he's bringing these couplets to us in two epistles that are written to the local church. And I think what Paul is saying, these are the three constituent elements of a local church. We can't understand our marriages apart from, being anchored in the local church. And I think every husband and wife ought to look at the local church as their home base, the base of operations for their marriage. It's a new way of looking at marriage. We often look at, maybe the most we would say is it's good for couples to be in a local church because they'll get encouragement for their marriage. I think Paul might be saying it's good for couples to be involved in a local church for what they will give as a constituent element of that most important community in this world, the local church, what the couple can give to the local church and fulfill God's, kingdom agenda through the local church.
So that relates to another question of why did you include a chapter for singles? I mean, this is a book on marriage. You've got a whole chapter talking about singles. You're a pastor in Phoenix. You've got single people in your church, some who've been called to singleness, some who are desiring to be married. What's the role of singles in the life of the church and in the life of married couples as we think about our single brothers and sisters?
Well, yes. I mean, every one of us is single at one point or another in our lives. And just to talk about how the glory of God can be lived out within a marriage can make it sound like that's the only way God's glory can be expressed among humans, and that's just not true. There is a way in which the love of Christ can, come into everyone's life, single or married, and that can be expressed outwardly, whether one is married or single. It's absolutely vital to, I think, do what Paul does, show that people who are unmarried, by the way, single is not a word that appears in the Bible. It's translated into English as a word, but the word single is never used in the original documents to refer to people who are unmarried. I think Paul does is he talks about single-hearted people and people who are focused singly on Jesus Christ. And he says an unmarried person can be more undistracted in that focus than a person who is married. And that's a huge statement. When it comes to looking at what God wants to do in this world, an unmarried person might be less distracted in accomplishing a goal that great. Singles have a very important place in God's economy, and I felt that they should be included in this book.
I'm glad you included them. Final question, I made an observation on Twitter that it's one of the few books that, only book in existence that Kevin Vanhoozer, one of our great contemporary theologians, and Alice Cooper, one of the great rock stars of all time, both endorse this book. Who are the sort of people that you imagine reading this? Is this primarily a premarital book? Is this a book for people who are just starting in marriage? Or what are the different sorts of people you imagine reading this book?
I hope this will cover everyone, because we're not looking at marriage in this book in terms of just giving lists of practical pieces of advice. We're trying to anchor marriage, as the Bible, I think, does, in the glory of God and the cross of Christ. Those two huge, magnificent themes immediately, I think, bring in everybody. And the manuscript has been read by a couple who've been married 55 years, and they announced that the biblical content really changed their marriage. 55 years. And of course, yes, for premarital, all young couples, wouldn't they want to know more about how the glory of God and the cross of Christ can be brought to bear on their union, and what a mountain they could climb together for God's glory.